Is the deep state preparing us for another pandemic to take us even farther down the road of communism? And speaking of communism, what about the Democrat National Convention? Stay tuned for more on Patriot Radio. Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Today on Patriot Radio, right now in the Asian Pacific Theater, you have the United States beginning some major military drills with Korea. In the Middle East, Israel continues to prepare for war. On the Russia front, Ukraine continues to invade further and cut off the Russian army in the south in Kursk, and chaos at the Democrat National Convention. And lastly, the bird flu seems to be gaining some traction. We're going to talk about all of that and more today on Patriot Radio. And remember, we are here to prepare you and your family for the times ahead. In fact, the times that are already upon us. But no fear, we were made for this. During the summer of harvest, take a moment. Subscribe to us on Rumble. Follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence updates and breaking news. Better than anybody else out there. We aggregate everybody, and we are always way ahead of the mainstream media in bringing that information out. And today, your encouraging word and Bible study coming to us from Proverbs 18, verse 4. The words of a person's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. In this time of uncertainty, and a lot of people focusing on the doom and gloom, there is always hope. God is warning us of these things coming so that we can speak out as deep waters. Wisdom and hope and comfort that America is not lost. America is not destined for the ash heap of history. In fact, I believe Americans are rising now to the occasion, and this will be our finest hour. But the question is for you and your family, what are you doing about it locally? Well, prepare, get involved, and take the fight to those that would seek to overthrow the United States of America, the jihadis and the communists and the globalists, to the local level. After all, our elected officials are our friends and neighbors, and they should be listening to us, not outside forces. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing, coming to us from the globalist front.
Those naughty globalists.
Ray Kurzweil, the transhuman when humans merge with science fiction. Ray Kurzweil is the consummate transhumanist and technocrat all rolled into one. He's also the chief scientist at Google and hopes for his head to be frozen by Allcore Life Extension in Scottsdale, Arizona. I find it very interesting that they put the refrigerators in Arizona. What if the power goes out? Anyway, just a side note and a thought there. In 2017, he doubled down on his prediction of reaching the singularity by 2029, advancing his original timeline from 2045. The problem is he's blending science fiction with reality, and these guys really mean this. They really want to transform humans into some cyborg weird mix that will live for eternity. Well, we know that's not true because every human being is appointed to death. And also we know it's not true because who then controls the cyborgs and the augmented reality and the augmented limbs and the augmented eyesight and the augmented cerebral interfaces? In other words, your brain. Because if you can hack a computer and your computer's hooked up to you, that means you can hack you too. So transhumanism is just an extension of a grand satanic lie, and that is the idea that you can have eternal life without God, when in fact, Jesus Christ paid the price on the cross 2,000 years ago so that we could live with him in eternity. And there is no way that man could have done that. It was only by his shed blood. And that brings us now to the China front. The United States and South Korea have kicked off major joint military drills. In addition to that, very quietly, supplies, old World War II air bases are all being refurbished and replenished across the Pacific Island chain in preparation for war with China. Now, many people have asked the question, is that really going to happen? Would the Chinese really do that? Well, yes, absolutely, they would really do that. In fact, they've signaled their intent to do it between 2025 and 2027. However, the Chinese government is analyzing whether or not they should do it earlier if it looks like President Trump is elected, because they won't be able to while he is in office. And so that brings a window of time between September and October where the Chinese could potentially invade or blockade Taiwan. Now, here's what's very interesting. Last year, we reported here on Patriot Radio, it looked like the Chinese did something called a certification exercise. In other words, the Chinese civil government was being assured by the military that they were ready to invade Taiwan by doing this exercise, that their Navy was ready, their Army was ready, their missile forces were ready, that all of these things were in place and they were certified, yes, we're ready to invade Taiwan. Now it is up to the civilian leadership when that is to occur. We also reported on Patriot Radio that they were going to use ferries, civilian ferries, as one of the landing craft to try to invade Taiwan. Now, here is the point tying this into the September-October timeframe. This is based on weather and tides. Eastern Taiwan are virtually sheer cliffs, and there's only a couple of beaches that are very, very well defended and fortified that the Chinese could actually invade. However, on the western side, while there are fortified areas, the entire coast could be invaded. However, the water is very shallow for about a mile off the coast of Taiwan, making it extremely difficult to do an amphibious landing if the seas are rough. Therefore, September-October is a typical time frame that strategists and analysts have identified for China to invade. So, if they miss this time window, does that mean that they're waiting for the spring, where they're going to postpone for 4 years until Trump is out of office? The Chinese are weighing this right now, and so is the rest of the world. And that brings us now to the Middle East front. The Algerian president announced yesterday that his country's army is prepared to enter Palestine as soon as the borders between Egypt and Gaza are open. Now, even if you don't like Israel, and as you know, here on Patriot Radio, we are very much for the ability of Israel to defend itself. But even if you don't like them, this is why the Israelis are not going to give up the Philadelphia corridor. In other words, a corridor between Gaza and Egypt. Not only are there tunnels that were underneath there and arms that was being smuggled between Egypt and Gaza, but right here, the Algerian president is saying we will invade as soon as the borders are opened. Well, why would Israel ever allow that then to happen? I mean, we need to listen. This isn't some piker, some weird organization spokesman saying this. This is the Algerian president saying this. Why would we expect Israel not to guard its own borders? Well, probably a lesson for us to guard ours at the southern border as well. Also, several associates of former Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh, including at least 7 of his bodyguards and multiple advisors, were eliminated today by an Israeli airstrike on the Al-Shati refugee camp in the northern Gaza Strip. So once again, and very systematically, the Israelis are taking apart Hamas leadership. Which brings us to an educational point about Hamas. Now, for many of you, you've heard me say this, but I'm going to reiterate it. The Holy Land Foundation trial is a key trial and key to understanding Hamas, especially even in America. The Holy Land Foundation trial was the largest terror financing trial ever successfully prosecuted in U.S. history. As part of that trial, a series of unindicted co-conspirators, literally dozens of organizations inside the United States, were listed as members of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood or associated with the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood. Among those, the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, and all of these connected, by the way, to Hamas. Even what would be considered the bank of Hamas, the North American Islamic Trust, were listed as unindicted co-conspirators in this trial. That list of unindicted co-conspirators was also upheld on appeal. So with that, there's a couple of quotes. One of these is from the U.S. Justice Department. HLF, or the Holy Land Foundation trial, was incorporated by Shukri Abu Baker and a few other associates here who worked as fundraisers. Together with others, they provided material support to the Hamas movement. Then you have the UN Secretary General. Now, understand this. What happened to Israel on October 7th is what Hamas would want to do inside the United States of America. And they have said as much regarding the violence that they want to perpetrate, the jihad that they want to perpetrate against the United States of America. More than 250 hostages reported raped, sexually assaulted on October 7th, 2023, the first day of the attack. Those still in captivity continue to face this torture. This is the UN Secretary General. Now, it's like he forgot he said this, because now he's kind of trying to come back and say, well, we don't understand why Israel's continuing to attack. They're trying to dismantle Hamas as a movement, which is what should happen here in the United States of America. These people believe in jihad, which is defined in the Reliance of the Traveler, the foremost Sunni Islamic jurisprudence handbook, as warfare against non-Muslims, in other words, Christians and Jews. They say it outright. It's in their documentation. We should start taking them at their word and dismantle these networks inside the United States of America. Also, from the FBI archives, the FBI's fight against terrorism funding paid a big dividend yesterday when 5 former leaders of a U.S.-based Muslim charity were convicted of funneling more than $12 million to the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas. So you have the UN Secretary General, you have the FBI archives, and you have the Holy Land Foundation trial, all in the U.S. Justice Department, all admitting this, and it's as if this never happened, and we have people inside the United States of America now supporting Hamas. Incredible. And that brings us now to the Russia front. The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, said, it is clear the United States ordered the Nord Stream attacks. Now, that is a very provocative statement of the Foreign Minister of Russia, and it just shows that as far as the United States and Russia are concerned, it seems like there is an intentional collision course here. I want to mention this again and take another little learning moment. So we have talked about on this show the Soviet defectors to the United States of America, specifically Anatoly Golitsyn, 1983. He was a strategic planner for the KGB, and he outlined, and he has been over 90% accurate in what he wrote, that there would be World War III with Russia. And then you had later, in 1993, at Stanislav Lunev, who worked with the GRU, so you're talking military intelligence, but testified before Congress in 2000 that out of 132 suitcase nuclear weapons, only 48 were accounted for. I want you to hear that again, and that many were left inside the United States as part of a strategy to detonate them and create chaos in the United States prior to World War III. Then Stanislav Lunev said to J.R. Nyquist here on Patriot Radio that they were adopting, and they being military intelligence, GRU of the former Soviet Union and China, came together with a pact in 1991 and were developing a strategy to invade the United States, similar to how Germany invaded Norway in World War II. And how did they do that? They infiltrated special forces into the country, pre-positioned weapons and equipment to create chaos inside the country. This is what they agreed on after the wall fell. So when we're talking about these inflammatory statements from Russia, Russia is not our friend. And yes, there are globalists in the West, but yes, there are globalists in the East. And what you are seeing is a fight, a vying for power between the two. This is why our southern border takes on a hugely important aspect regarding our national security, because they are using our southern border to do that infiltration, even up to present day. Also on the Russia front, Ukraine is now have confirmed to have destroyed the third and final bridge across the Sime River, connecting Russian forces from the north into Kursk. And what that means is there's only one pontoon bridge left, and Ukrainian forces are only about 12 kilometers away from that. I would imagine that that is going to be destroyed here very, very shortly, cutting off reinforcements to Russian forces. And in addition to that, on the next map, you can see Ukrainian forces have captured the town of Vishnevka, Kursk, and they are now approaching that pontoon bridge. And this is putting pressure on other places in the front. So this is not some small incursion that has occurred. There's a very strategic implication here for Russian forces all the way across the front. Also, on the Europe front, we have France and wildfires forcing thousands to flee. I've got to ask the question, you got to wonder if any of this is arson as part of a plan to destabilize or just sow general chaos in France. Also, the media is silent in Ireland after an Islamist terrorist stabbed Catholic priest. Last Thursday, a 16-year-old boy stabbed Father Paul Murphy multiple times at Renmore Barracks in Galway, where he serves as the army chaplain. Severely wounded, he was saved by soldiers who overpowered the attacker. Why isn't this national news? Again, remember what we said here a few weeks ago. They are going to begin, this is jihadists and communists, they're going to begin to target Christian leaders and political leaders and property. They're going to target specifically. This isn't widespread unrest yet, but this is what we're seeing, and it's not just in the United States. It's obviously happening in Europe as well. And that brings us now to the national front. Shots fired at Lackland Air Force Base entrance early Saturday morning. At least one individual fired upon an entrance to the Joint Base San Antonio Lackland, causing security personnel to respond by returning fire. One incident took place at about 2:15 a.m., so this is very interesting that it was that time of night. So this was a serious attack by what appeared to be professionals coordinated, while a second occurred at 5 a.m. Guards reported that shots were fired from the same sedan in both cases, which appeared to have two individuals inside. And they were probing the response from the forces at Lackland Air Force Base. So again, you have targeted attacks ramping up now in both the United States and Europe. Also, from Gateway Pundit, chaos erupts after far-left protesters break down the DNC wall at the convention. Projectiles fly, police and riot gear rush in. Well, I want to just stop there and go to the next article briefly, because in a stunning display of irony, the Democrats built an impenetrable wall. And they can't even build a wall right around their convention in Chicago, and then they demand identification to come in. What that they would be so consistent with our southern border. And that brings us back to the chaos there. Anti-Israel agitator storms the DNC stage and snatches the microphone and screams at Harris supporters. And again, it seems like the Democrats are not in unity. Biden and Obama are not going to stay for Harris's acceptance speech. So something here is just off. It's almost as if the Democrats want to lose. Why would they want to do that? Are they planning something that horrible? I don't know, but it raises a huge question. Also from Raw's Alerts, pro-Palestine protesters have broken the Democrat National Convention fence. You can kind of take a look at this. They're screaming. They're dressed up in black bloc. They've got, and interesting enough, too, a whole bunch of flags and pre-printed things. So obviously there's some money behind this, in addition to some of the loudspeakers that they're using. Also, the leftist meltdown after the New York Times columnist tells the truth about the Democrats' coup. Maureen Dowd of the New York Times, the ultimate establishment mouthpiece, I couldn't agree more, for some reason told the truth about powerful Democrats' coup against President Joe Biden last month, which resulted in the sudden and undemocrat elevation of Vice President Kamala Harris to the top of the party's presidential ticket. Meanwhile, on X, Dowd's unusual honesty left liberal readers apoplectic. The Dems are delighted, but a coup is still a coup. And that brings us lastly to the bird flu. Can we bring I don't know if it's possible, but can we bring the picture back up? You guys did a great job on this graphic. So, are they going to really try to do a pandemic again? It appears so. In fact, there's a bird flu summit coming up. The conference is October 2nd and 3rd. The workshop's October 4th. So they even have it's birdflusummit.com. Check this out. So, and as you read down through there, it's very clear that they want to implement better strategies this time. It's like they didn't not just learn the lesson. I think this is intentional. They're preparing for a lockdown, and they're going out to school districts as well, trying to prepare for this as if we're going to lock down again. I think Americans have had enough. But there's a video I want to play for you, and I'm going to just kind of narrate through it because they're telling us exactly what is about to happen and what they're looking for specifically to justify the declaration of a pandemic again. Go ahead and roll the video.
Dr. Butler, can you start by giving us an update on the current status of the outbreak?
Well, as of June 24th, H5N1 influenza has been detected in dairy cows in 120 premises in 12 different states.
Okay, I want to stop there. So what you're hearing right now is they're already saying there's an outbreak. They're just saying now how bad is it? It's not a pandemic yet, but wait, because he's going to describe what would constitute a change in the so-called risk assessment. In other words, they're going to declare it a pandemic if they see these things happen. Roll it.
To date, 3 human cases have been detected in the U.S., all occurring in individuals who had exposure to cows that were in infected herds. So, for example, occupations that we would include that are in a higher risk category include dairy workers, slaughterhouse workers, milk processing facility employees, poultry farm workers, veterinarians, and veterinary assistants.
Okay, I want to stop right there. I want you to understand the implication of what he just said. Quite literally, that would shut down the cattle industry. I want you to hear what he just said. It wasn't just dairy, but you're talking processing plants and butchers shutting down the food supply, or a good portion of the food supply of the United States of America. I mean, hamburgers, everything comes from this. And then notice what he said about veterinarians. Those are the ones that inspect the animals as well. So would that affect chickens and the rest of livestock herds? It would seem that the answer is yes. So this is not just some small thing that he is saying. There's broad implications in the language that he just used. Go ahead and roll it.
Now, there's a few things that we're watching for very closely that would change the risk assessment.
Okay, here we go.
First of all, if we identified multiple simultaneous instances of influenza H5N1 spreading from birds, cattle, or other animals to people, or certain genetic changes in circulating viruses, that could raise the alarm that indicate that the virus is adapting and may be able to spread more easily among people.
Okay, so what he's saying now, quickly, is that if they see a mutation in the virus, that could raise alarm to a pandemic level. If they see multiple outbreaks that are spreading, and notice there's no like spreading how fast, spreading to how many things. They don't put anything on that, but what they're doing is setting up a narrative for a bird flu outbreak. Now, this monkeypox thing, there is no way, I don't think politically or narratively, they could really go forward with that, because monkeypox is spread through a specific behavior and a specific population, okay? And I think that it would be just very difficult politically and very difficult just from a narrative standpoint to try to voice that on Americans as that's the next pandemic. However, the bird flu and locking down a whole bunch of our dairies, cattle producers, veterinarians, processing plants, butchers, well, that's a whole different story. And you can see how they're setting the narrative up. Well, if we see these things, that would be a trigger. And as I said before, that is what I believe they're trying to do, and it's to go to a polycrisis. Pandemic, economic downturn, some sort of political crisis, election crisis, something like that. And then war. And on top of that polycrisis, some sort of cyber event. Now, we're going to get some experts on here in the next few weeks, and we're going to talk about this stuff so you can be prepared for it. The fact of the matter is, be preparing now. And that's the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. And if you get the opportunity, please subscribe to us on Rumble. Follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence updates and breaking news. And as you do, share this stuff with your friends and family so they can see the primary sources and see the accuracy here and be ready for what's coming.